So energy is fundamental. And now actually, I don't think I'm surprising anybody by telling you that. What is in a way surprising is that the cost of energy in societies like this and most of the OECD societies of the developed world is relatively small. It's something like 5%. And it depends a bit on how you calculate it, because if you include the cost of the cars where you use the energy for transportation, it goes up. But I mean, if you look more basically at the energy cost, it's something like 5% of our overall economy, maybe even a bit less. That's no more than the increase in our GDP maybe 3 years. So in a certain way you could say energy is not economically terribly important. Now on the other hand, energy is quite important, and more important than the relatively low fraction means. And why is that? Now first thing is that for less wealthy people or poor people, energy cost is a higher share of the overall cost. And actually when they liberalized the energy markets, electricity markets in the UK, they generated a special concept which was called energy poverty. That basically means that there were a number of people who were unable to pay their heating bills or their electricity bills. Because if you are less wealthy, if something goes up from 7 or 8% to 10 or 12%, it has a huge impact. So that's one thing. Another thing where energy is economically more important than just a relatively modest share is the fact that many of our industries depend on energy, has an important energy cost, and it can decide on their competitiveness. When, for instance, electricity prices went up in California some years ago, it became uncompetitive to produce aluminium. So if I have argued the two important reasons for dealing with energy in a more globalized world, namely the climate problem, which is more or less a responsibility for all of us. I mean, even for me, for future generations, you will see it more for your own generation. That's fine. That means you would be believed to be more sort of excited about it or involved in it than I am, because I'll go my rest of the time without any major problems. But in 30 or 40 or 50 years, it could be quite serious. And the economic aspect is important in spite of the fact that energy is not necessarily a terribly big share of our economy. And the third one is, of course, the security of supply, that particularly on oil, but of course at some point in the future also on gas and furthermore on coal, that there won't simply be the energy available which is necessary to if I say so, fuel our activities the way we are used to run our activities, if we will continue to depend on oil, coal and gas to the extent we do today. Now if you go to Warsaw, you should be aware that there is a sort of a schism in Europe, because if you go to the old EU member states, you will see that the climate change has been a very strong driver for the demand for a determined energy policy. But if you go to the new member states, whether the Czech Republic, Poland, the Baltic, Bulgaria, Romania, or wherever, you will see that security of supply is much more on their mind. A bit dependent on where you go, you will see different preoccupations. Of course, if you go to Russia, neither security of supply nor climate change is very high on the agenda. There it's rather the interest in being able to sell energy along the usual roads, because Russia is one of those countries which is a net energy exporter. But by the way, so is Denmark, just to make you aware of this peculiar fact, because we weren't, and in the future we won't be either. We have been privileged in the economic sense by having a period of some 20 years where North Sea oil and gas made us a net energy exporter. But these days will come to an end pretty soon. But of course it is important to be aware, and in all this you cannot expect to find the same reaction, the same concerns in different countries. And of course that goes even more if you go to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia or the Emirates or others, where they will say, oh, we are terribly concerned if somebody finds out that they don't need our oil, because what are we going to live from them? And they will do everything possible to talk down both the climate issue and the security of supply issue. And that's why in the shorter term we can count on these countries trying to provide the oil which is necessary if there's a disruption, which now there may be in Libya. I mean, it's all too short term to know exactly what it turns out like. but these countries have a medium-term interest in maintaining the idea that there's no security of supply problem. So be aware that whoever you talk to, you will be expected to have different concerns, different reactions to these three legs in the energy sector, which is the security of supply, which is the climate change, and which is the economic aspects. Was that a starter?
That's a good starter. I was wondering whether it would be relevant to make a jump to the non-renewable and renewable thing.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
to that, I mean.
Okay. What you should know, have you distributed the report from the Climate Commission?
No, not to these folks.
You should have done that.
Yeah,
it's
I should have done
bad
that.
management. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. 3 years ago, the Danish government established the Climate Commission, which actually was rather an energy policy commission. And they asked 10 people, I was one of them, to sit down and answer the question, how and when will it be possible for the Danish society to function without the use of fossil fuels, without oil, coal and gas? What will be the cost? And we assume that our sort of relatively good level of standard of living will be maintained. We expect our industry to remain competitive. Now there's a question of whether it is competitive already now, but I mean there shouldn't be any serious degradation in that. So we were asked this question: is it possible to see how the transition to a non-fossil fuel economy could happen, recognizing, because everybody recognizes that of course coal, oil and gas are finite resources. There is only so much out there. We don't know exactly how much, but you can't go on forever just pulling it out, because then it'll be exhausted. and that was a quite interesting exercise, I have to say. And some in the group, particularly the economist, I'm an engineer, so I'm not one of them, would say, oh, well, this is very unlikely that we will see a possibility to do that. And if it will be possible, it will certainly be terribly expensive, prohibitively expensive, we would say. And by the way, we would particularly believe that it would be big damage to the Danish economy if this would be something we do on our own, whereas the rest of the world would go on using fossil fuels. Now to jump 2.5 years to the publication of the report, which was September last, the report said, well, point one,